Keith Olsted, and I am delighted to welcome you to this evening's program. I think you're in for a great time. Our chapter is playing it cautiously these days because of COVID. So we welcome you to this online presentation. Excuse me, when the pandemic concerns are reduced more, we'll be able to meet again in person, but for now, we simply are having all of our various meetings by Zoom. Our next board meeting is on the 27th at 7 o'clock in the evening, and we do that by Zoom. Go ahead and scroll forward. If you are interested in our advocacy work as a chapter, that next meeting is on September 15th at 2 in the afternoon. There you see on your screen the names of the people to contact. Our community engagement committee, which is the committee that plans these programs and field trips and a number of other ways in which we engage with the community. That group meets next on October 7th at 6 in the evening. You contact Katie for that to get included in that meeting. We also have a migration partners committee working on our relationship with birding stations and now schools in Honduras. That next meeting is on September 21st, Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. Contact Wilmer Fernandez for participation in that meeting. And then our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee will meet next on October 6th, another Tuesday at 6 p.m. And Amy Simpson-Dean is the person to contact there. You are welcome to join these meetings in any way that you would like to participate. Our next virtual program will be on October 5th at 7 in the evening. And we hope we'll be able to see you back again for that. In the meantime, we have some upcoming bird hikes to share with you too. On September 12th, registration is required. Brandon Lenz will be leading that. And this is particularly oriented to people who are just now getting into birding. I suspect most of us know that during the pandemic, birding has become a highly elevated activity among people, many people stepping into it for the first time. This bird hike would be perfect for you, but you do need to you need to register, which you can do with Brandon. So with that, I think we'll simply do another part of our typical check-in. We'd like to know what birds you've been seeing. So you can either write in the chat or raise your hand and let us know what you're seeing these days. I had the delightful experience myself a couple days ago of seeing an immature broad-winged hawk down at Wood Lake Nature Center that got terrorized by a yellow jacket. It got so anxious about the yellow jacket zooming around it that the yellow jacket landed on the branch next to the hawk. The hawk moved away from the yellow jacket, and the yellow jacket followed the hawk, and finally the hawk had to fly away. The little guy won. I thought it was just delightful. So tell us what you're seeing. We typically have people participating in our programs from all over the place. So whether you're from Minnesota or not, tell us what you're seeing these days as we just now get into the fall migration. Kayla Wolf has seen cactus wren and kestrels. Alicia saw common nighthawks, which are really a delight to see. Michael says there are so many wood ducks. Mary Kane says she's seen crows. Green heron from Amelia. The juvenile green herons, this seems to have been a good year for the breeding of green herons because the juveniles are pretty easy to find around the metro area. Irene saw golden eagles in North Dakota. Wow, cool. Pair of broadwing hawks is circling the neighborhood in South Minneapolis, as have a family of Cooper's hawks, according to Leslie. Eleanor has been seeing sandhill cranes. Patricia has seen blue jays, crows, and seagulls in the California coast. Well, it's great to see that folks are getting out there. Ospreys up in Brooklyn Park, according to Stephanie. This is just great. It is amazing. My wife and I usually eat our breakfasts on our backyard deck. This morning we watched 2 ruby-throated hummingbirds, and in all likelihood they were juveniles who seemed to be sticking together, and the 2 of them played around in our garden for a good 5 minutes while we were having breakfast. Just incredible creatures. So if there are any more reports that people want to toss into the chat, we'll be glad to receive them. But it's great to see that you're getting out and about and enjoying the birds this fall. If you want more information about things, activities, or issues we're working on, feel free to check our website. The Audubon chapter of Minneapolis. We're actually undergoing a fair bit of work on the website, so that will be changing soon, but the same address will always work, and we'll be able to keep you up to date with what's happening. A couple more bird reports. A half dozen eastern towhees at William O'Brien, according to Jill, and Michael has seen a number of unidentified warbler species. These fall warblers present a particular challenge, but yes, I've been certainly seeing them both at Roberts and at Bird Sanctuary and at Wood Lake. I'm in South Minneapolis. They are coming through. So I think with that, let me turn our program over to Katie Burns, who chairs with Irene Bueno Padilla, chairs our Community Engagement Committee. And Katie, please introduce us into the program for this evening.
Thank you very much. So as you can see, there's a lot of different ways to get involved with our Audubon chapter, and some of it can actually be done virtually as well. So all are welcome. And again, you can certainly reach out to our chapter leaders and the different committee leaders. If you did not get a chance to write down the contact information, you can Google Audubon chapter of Minneapolis, and you can find the contacts and all the details there. We're working hard to get our website updated with all the upcoming activities and things happening. So keep an eye there for upcoming events and more programs. So tonight we are very lucky to have with us Margie Menzies with Ridge Bird Observatory, and that's here in Minnesota, up along the North Shore, and it is a very special place. And I think, and Margie, I think you could chime in here, that there's so much more happening there than I think people realize. Many people are familiar with Hawk Ridge, the location, and know it very well as a major migratory pathway for raptors or birds of prey. But being that we are smack dab in the middle of the Mississippi Flyway, the most heavily traveled migratory pathway for birds here in North America, there's a lot more going on there. And Ridge Bird Observatory has had an incredible amount of work going on. And this is a wonderful opportunity for us to have Margie with us and to tell us what all is happening in terms of the research, new developments. And I will say that Margie is an incredible presenter, so we're really glad to have her here. Her background, if you do not remember from the introduction to the program, she is a bird nerd to the core. She has been involved in bird conservation and research in every different direction. So the conservation, on the ground conservation, outreach and education, the research components, and helping to run an organization and multiples over the years, if I recall correctly. So you are to the core bird nerd and bird conservationist, and we are definitely happy to have you here. You are amongst friends, and everyone is really excited to kind of take in everything that you have to share. So with that, I am going to let people know that I'll be shutting off my video and turning host over to Margie so that she can share her screen. If you have questions along the way, just so we can keep things organized, let's please put any questions that you have. Just, I know they're fresh in your mind and you want to get them out, and sometimes we don't remember them at the end of the program. Drop those into the Q&A box. The chat function can kind of get a little cluttered and hard to keep track of everything that's going on. So let's just drop any questions that you have along the way into the Q&A function, and Margie and I will go through those at the end of the program. And then additionally, for any folks who are interested in learning about opportunities to get out and do some fall migration birding hikes in our area, you can drop your contact information into the chat function. And that way it will give me a heads up that I should be reaching out to you and letting you know what's happening, and see what areas are of most interest to you in terms of birding within the area that we work in. All right, Margie, give me one moment here to change your role. And then you will be able to share your screen and take it away.
Thank
All right,
you.
there you go.
Okay. Says I'm the host now. Yeehaw. All right. Let's share and let's go from the beginning. Are we seeing things? Yay. Okay, I think that's a raised hand.
Yes,
Thank
it
you,
looks
everybody.
good.
Yeah. Just making sure. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. It's great fun to get the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about one of my favorite things, Ridge Bird Observatory, and things are off and running. And boy, did we have a nice day today. So what I want to do tonight is kind of give you just some updates and highlights of what's happening so far in the fall of 2021. We'll look ahead to winter and spring stuff just a little bit. And I also want to spend some time highlighting some of the really cool research efforts that are underway at Hawk Ridge. There's a ton, but I'm going to just highlight a few of them tonight. And then we'll give you a chance to ask some questions and things at the very end. So that's the plan. Here we go. Hawk Ridge Bird Observatory, our mission to protect birds of prey and other migratory birds in the Western Lake Superior region through research, education, and stewardship. So lots of things going on. It's never a bad place to hang out. I got to tell you that. Doesn't matter what day you're up there. The view is just amazing. So yeah, this is a bald eagle coming in nice and close at the Hawk Ridge Overlook area. And here's a little bit of a map as to where we are in Duluth. We're on the eastern end of the city of Duluth, just about before you leave town to head further north on Highway 61. You can find us on that end of town on East Skyline Parkway. Hawk Ridge has always been known historically as a place for raptors and birds. Early history has birds shot for target practice. We didn't understand the roles of raptors and the top of the food chain very well at that point. So there are tales of people gathering bushel baskets full of dead birds, pick up loads of dead birds, because there was a very persistent idea that raptors were bad for the environment and bad for the other things. Lots of people got interested in what was happening at Hawk Ridge in 1937. Members of the Duluth Bird Club, which later became the Duluth Audubon Society, started their campaign to try and change the way things were done at Hawk Ridge. And a big part of that story is Jack Hofsland, who was the first professor of ornithology at the University of Minnesota, Duluth. And he very quickly keyed into what was going on at Hawk Ridge, and he'd loyally go out every single day and put a sign out saying, please don't shoot the hawks, please don't shoot the hawks. And he'd come back every night and they'd be off in the woods somewhere. So he would put out some more. And the more he worked at it, the more people he got involved and interested in what was going on. And eventually that small group of people made a huge difference. They were able to appear before the city council and convince them to pass an ordinance to forbid shooting within the city limits of Duluth, which really put an end to shooting hawks at Hawk Ridge, thankfully. In 1972, the nature reserve was established and the Hawk Watch and Raptor banding started. So we are in year number 50. Thank you ever so much. It's amazing. In 2004, the Hawk Ridge Bird Observatory was established and the nature reserve designated as the very first important bird area in Minnesota. So yeah, we are in our 50th year of counting. And Hawk Ridge, as Katie mentioned, we are the beginning of that central flyway. Every year, 3 to 5 billion birds head south in this flyway. And I always enjoy showing this graphic. This is, you might recognize it from the Science article in 2019 about the decline of North American avifauna. In other words, the birds. But I think it's a really cool graphic because it shows just the density of traffic through this central flyway. It's estimated that 60% or more of the birds that migrate south or migrate at all in North America use this central flyway. So it's a very important one for what's going on. These birds are primarily coming from the boreal forest, and they are using what we call leading lines. And it can be things like mountain ranges and habitat, weather systems, bodies of water. In particular, we know from banding that birds that are from the boreal forest tend to want to stay in the boreal forest when they're in that southern migration as long as they possibly can. And so they will follow that boreal forest line down until they hit Lake Superior. And at that point, they've got a choice to make. 160 miles over water is not a trip that most birds are going to take. There's no place to land, there's nothing to eat, and there is really no advantage at all from air currents and thermals. So most of the birds are going to stay on the land side and funnel down either to the east or the west, depending on what's happening with the winds as they reach that point. If they catch the winds to the west, that'll funnel them right down through Duluth and through to Hawk Ridge. And Hawk Ridge is one of the top 2 or 3 sites in the US. We typically count over 60,000 raptors every year, as many as 75,000, and sometimes even more than that. We'll talk about some of that sort of stuff. So yep, we are in our 50th year of standard count data. We have this is the count platform, and these folks are definitely busy at work looking off and trying to see what's happening. They've got the best view of anybody up there, and they're doing just a phenomenal job. Fall migration gets started for a lot of birds earlier than you might think. For many, July is the beginning. And the early migrants belong to the birds that tend to travel the furthest. We start counting officially August the 15th every year and continue through the 30th of November, weather permitting. And one of our early ones, somebody said they were seeing common nighthawks. Duluth is the common nighthawk capital of the world as far as the number of birds counted. There are more common nighthawks counted in Duluth than anywhere else in the world, at least as of right now. For example, August the 24th last year in 2020, 27,580 were counted through the course of that day. Just blow your mind. Crazy. This year we have there's a grad student at UMD, Steve Colby, who's been studying nighthawks, and thus far this year, and really we're kind of at the tag end of the common nighthawk season, which usually starts in mid-August and usually ends pretty close to the end of August, but sometimes goes into September. There's always a few stragglers. We're still seeing a couple of nighthawks a day up at Hawk Ridge, but he's seen more than 20,000 so far this year. So there are definitely a lot of common nighthawks out there. If you look at raptors, they come at different times. This is a nice graphic that kind of illustrates some of that sort of stuff. Basically, simply speaking, we get the birds that have the longest distance to go, typically coming through earlier. Smaller birds tend to come through before the larger ones. Young birds ahead of the adults. They need a little bit of a boost in that first run out in their migration. And females tend to fly a little bit earlier than the males. So all kinds of interesting puzzles going on. Osprey are one of the earliest to go. They are limited in their fishing abilities. They can only go about 3 feet into the water. And as the fall arrives and the water starts to cool, the fish head down lower. And so they are going to get out of here and head to where the fishing's going to be better sooner than a lot of the other birds. Other early migrants are the falcons. Kestrels and green darner dragonflies tend to travel about the same time. And that's Frank Nicoletti, our chief bander and spring counter, had done a study a number of years ago tracking the movement of green darner dragonflies and kestrels and found that, yep, they go hand in hand. And it's not unusual to watch those kestrels as they're migrating through, reach out and grab those dragonflies as they're flying and munch as they go. It's amazing. Sharp-shinned hawks are coming through in big numbers early, although they will continue through early October. And there are lots and lots of them moving. In fact, today alone, they counted 511 sharp-shinned hawks today. Another big player, in fact, we tend to see more of these hawks than all the rest of them put together in the raptor family. These are broadwing hawks. And this is a nice small kettle. Kettles at Hawk Ridge often will reach 400, 500, even 800 birds. It's just amazing to see. When it's time for the broadwing kettles, I always say, thank the good Lord for bald eagles, because you can see the bald eagles out there traveling around in the same kettle. Put your binoculars up to look at the bald eagle, and all of a sudden behind the bald eagle is what looks like a swarm of angry bees full of these broadwing hawks swarming back in there. And like I say, that a kettle of 400 to 800 is a sight to see. We frequently get asked, how in the world do you count that many birds? And I always say that watching the kettles of birds is like watching a swirling mass. And but the bottom line is, for these birds, it's almost like riding an elevator. When you get to the top of the elevator, you get off and these birds start streaming south again. And that's when the counters are most able to catch them and count them fairly accurately. So that's what they're waiting for. But these birds are making the ultimate use of those thermals, because for every mile they can reach in height through rising up through a kettle, they can soar 7 miles horizontally. So it's all about efficiency of flight. And here is a picture, two pictures. The bird in the upper left-hand corner is a juvenile Broadway hawk, and the one in the middle there is an adult. And you can tell the difference by looking at the width of the stripes in the tails, for one thing. Yeah, we usually see more of these. Last year, we had a little better than normal year with 32,920 counted in 2020. We average usually somewhere around 27,000 and change every year, but the highest ever count in a single day at Hawk Ridge was indeed of Broadway Hawks in 2003. And if you want to imagine how big that number could be for just a second, take a second and pick what you think it could be. And I will dutifully tell you here in a moment. It's amazing just to think about seeing that many birds in a single day. Everybody got a guess? All righty, here you go. The most that was counted in a single day was on the 15th of September 2003, and it was 101,698. Oh my goodness, that is a lot of birds. By the way, if you add in the other species counted in that day, it's 103,000 and change. So the Broadwings really can come in this fairly short window of time. We tend to say, well, we used to say it was mid-September to the third week or so in September, but it seems to be getting later. I would say now that the third and fourth weeks of September are the prime movement of Broadway hawks. And they tend to come through in a really narrow window of time because they are birds that tend to boogie right on through in their migration patterns. Their preferred food is reptiles and amphibians, and those are really hard to hunt on the fly. So their strategy tends to be fatten up in the breeding territory and then just go ahead and move on through and get the job done. Banding data tells us, and these birds are going all the way to South America. These birds can do that flight from Duluth to South America in as little as 18 days. Pretty amazing. As the fall progresses, mid-September has us starting our owl banding and the period of time where there's something going at Hawk Ridge 24/7. There's raptor banding during the daytime, owl banding all night, and songbird banding first thing in the morning. So lots of stuff going on. We tend to band a ton of northern saw-whet owls, again, more than most places in the country. Also a significant number of long-eared owls. So yeah, we're about, about a week away here from starting the owl banding season at Hawk Ridge. And there's some stats on there that you can read. I'm not gonna get too far gone into statistics. Northern saw-whet owls, we do have some fascinating records of recaptures, and you can see from these multicolored dots that they tend to migrate a little bit to the south, but they also significantly go to the east. You can see that some of these birds originate from the west. Pretty amazing. These teeny tiny little birds, they definitely win the prize for cute. One of our new trainees just about fell over yesterday. She was going through a talon box and looking at all the different talons that we have from birds, and she found the saw-whet owl one, and I thought she was going to just collapse with cuteness. So yeah, when you go to our website, there's a couple of different ways. If you want to be nerding out on bird stats and what's happening at Hawk Ridge, there's a couple of ways to do it. You'll see on this screenshot that there's a fall raptor count, and there's also a live up to the minute count. And I'll show you what both of those look like. This is the current as of the end of today. monthly total for September. This is the fall raptor count, and this concentrates on raptors alone. And you can see that we've had a significant number of birds already through in just the first few days of September. Now, bear in mind, we did also do the first or the from the 15th of August through the end of August. So that's added in there. So you can see the total so far. We've counted more than 1,000 bald eagles, 2,200 sharp-shinned hawks, 933 Broadway hawks, and so forth. So lots of volume coming through already. And this is the live up to the moment count. This is one way that you can look at it. I love these bar graphs because they tell you who's winning the prize on the most birds seen for the season. Right now, the Blue Jays have it sealed up with more than 8,000 Blue Jays counted so far this season. Cedar waxwings are not far behind. And yeah, we were talking about warbler, unknown warblers. Yep. Warbler SP stands for one that they can identify as a warbler, but they're not sure which one. Sometimes they're coming in flocks that are so big and mixed that it's really hard to pick out individual species. So yeah, Warbler SP is doing pretty good right now too. And then the top graphic gives you the top ones, and then the bottom one is all the others. So you can see, we see an enormous amount of birds through the course of a fall. I put on today's count just for fun. Today, from the time that we started counting until the rainstorm flooded us out, 4,103 birds, 2,085 of them were blue jays, lots of warblers, lots of sharp-shinned hawks today, cedar waxwings, a fair number of broadwings, they're starting to move, some Canada geese, and plenty of bald eagles. So lots of stuff going on. It was a good wind movement today. When you come to Hawk Ridge, try to time your visit so that you have good northern or northwesterly or westerly winds. Those are going to be the best movement times. Here's a quick summary of last year's Raptor banding. We typically band anywhere from 1,200 to 1,800 birds. Last year there was 1,341. It was an amazing year for a lot of things last year. By the way, that bird that I'm holding is a very unusual one for Duluth. Little bird quiz there. That's actually a red-shouldered hawk, and those tend to just blow in on occasion. And that particular one blew in, was captured and banded, and I had the privilege of showing it off to folks and then releasing it. So it was pretty exciting. So if we look at counting highlights from last fall, we had better than average years for turkey vultures, had a new single high count of 854 in a single day. Rough-legged hawks, last year was amazing for rough-legged hawks. We set a new season high. Note the average there at 579. The new season high was 1,948. It didn't just blow the record out of the water, it obliterated it. The new single day high was higher than the season average at 583. So interesting stuff going on with the rough-legged hawks. It was a good year for goshawks and broadwing hawks and golden eagles. On the other side of the spectrum, though, significantly fewer than normal osprey, northern harriers, sharpshins were down a little bit, Cooper's hawks, red tails, and so forth. So yeah, there's always give and take in the counting numbers. So it's kind of interesting to watch and see those. We did have a treat last fall and did capture the second ever golden eagle at Hawk Ridge. Abby, one of our banders, pulled it, and you can also see that it was quite chilly by late October at Hawk Ridge last year. So yeah, the total count for last fall was 62,780 84, slightly higher than the 10-year average of 21,150. So lots of stuff going on. Owl banding had a good year last year, definitely higher than average. Average is about 1,200 saw-whets a year, and last year they banded more than 1,600. So a lot of saw-whets. We also have another curious occurrence here. The picture in the lower right-hand corner there is an eastern screech owl, gray phase. This is a bird that has been captured at Hawk Ridge and recaptured 3 years running now. It'll be interesting to see this year if it turns up again for a 4th year. Screech owls are generally not in range here. So this is a new one, but it has consistently been there and been recaptured 3 years running. So we keep hoping that it has a mate and that we will have young screech owls, but we'll see. This year will tell the tale. But we also get a good diversity of other owls depending on the year. Last year was a good barred owl year. We also caught a great gray, which is fairly unusual, and 6 great horned owls as well. So lots of stuff going on last year. As we move into later fall, we see some of the later migrants and then move on into winter. And when we're doing winter, we get into some of the winter owl banding. Here's a great gray for you. This is the first great gray owl that I've ever held in my hands. Can you see how big they are? From the top of my head to my waist, they're enormous, just plain big. And yeah, check out those talons. We will try to capture and band and release as many of these as we can through the course of the winter. And here's another owl that we also try to catch. This is the northern hawk owl. So wintertime is fun as well. We don't totally give up our work. And we do have a spring count at Hawk Ridge. We have to do our spring count in other locations because the east skyline that we're on isn't plowed in the wintertime, and it can be pretty substantial to get in there. And we do start counting in the spring count March the 1st. So yeah, we use the west skyline in a couple of different places in the spring to count because it's a better view of birds coming from the south. Our east skyline location is indented a little bit, not as easy to see that traffic of the birds coming from the south. So we take advantage of the east skyline or the west skyline locations. We have 2 of them because if the wind is coming off the lake, we'll use a spot by by Thompson Hill. If we're any other winds, if it's not coming off the east, from the east or from the northeast, which is cold air blowing from the lake, we'll use the Thompson Hill site, but otherwise we'll be at Inger Tower or close to Inger Tower, which is the one that you can see here in the lower right-hand corner. It can be quite different from one spring to another. Here's a photo of a spring shot, and here's a 2019 shot on the March the 31st. There was still plenty of snow, and yes, it was still cold. So it can vary a whole lot. Last year didn't look like this at all, as we had almost virtually no snow through the course of the winter. So it certainly didn't look like this last spring on March the 31st. But yes, the spring count is amazing, and it's different from the fall count. In fact, we talked about the fact with the fall count, the adults come after the young, and think about reversing all of that stuff in the spring. The adults come before the young. And you can see that in this graphic with the adults being in green and the juveniles being in blue. So yeah, bald eagles get the whole thing started. Usually late February is the time you get going if you're a bald eagle. And we typically see more bald eagles in the spring than we do in the fall, which is an interesting thing. So yeah, and we set a new North American spring count record of 7,727 in 2019. One of these days, I'm going to figure out what the North American population size is of bald eagles and see what percentage of them we're actually seeing at Hawk Ridge. Fascinating question. But we also had the new North American single high count for a single day in 2019 of 1,076 bald eagles in one day. I was there and I watched that happen. It was amazing. Just imagine the sky full of kettles of bald eagles, and at any given moment you can scan your binoculars across the horizon and count more than 100 bald eagles at one time. We also see more turkey vultures in the spring than we do in the fall. So there you go. You've got an average fall count and an average spring count, and you'll see that yep, we tend to see more of them in the spring. Not quite twice as many, but almost. And now I want to walk into some of the research kinds of efforts that we have going at Hawk Ridge. As we transition from spring migration of the raptors, we also get all of the spring passerine migrants. And we started doing maps 8 seasons ago at Hawk Ridge. And this is a breeding bird survey. MAP stands for Monitoring Avian Productivity and Survivorship. And this is one of the things that I work closely with. The breeding season stretches from early June through early August. And we get a whole wide variety of different birds through the course of that time. In summer 2020, we haven't gotten our summer 21 update quite ready yet, so we'll give you 2020. That was the 7th sampling season, but we've done the 8th. We banded 269 new birds and had 85 recaptures, some from the same season, but some from many of previous seasons. It's fascinating to have the birds, like, for example, this upper right-hand corner picture of a red-eyed vireo. These birds, many of them are going all the way to South America and coming back to the exact same location and getting caught in the same location year after year. It's amazing to think about that tiny bird doing that kind of journey and surviving and being able to come back to the same location to raise their young year after year. So lots of fun stuff going on with that. We have approximately 33 species that are more irregular breeders, but 62 species total, and 16 or so of those that are caught every year. So even with the local breeding, there's some variation going on there. And I'm going to lead into another study with this series of pictures. This is a local Merlin tackling a pigeon who's actually probably weighs more than it does by quite a lot. And one of the studies that we've had going at Hawk Ridge for a number of years now is taking feather samples and measuring the amounts of mercury accumulating in the feathers. And it turned out, as we did hundreds of samples of birds, take a few breast feathers, which they quickly regrow, and sample those for mercury. And in the whole spectrum of raptors that we caught, we found that the birds that have the highest levels of mercury are the birds that eat other birds. So birds like this Merlin, Sharpshin hawks, peregrines, all of those guys have higher levels of mercury. So we started, in addition, after we learned that about the raptor end of things, we started doing tracking back the food chain, and are just now starting to get last spring in 2020, we got our first set of songbird feathers that we had sampled for mercury back, and found that rusty blackbirds and northern water thrushes really rank pretty high for the amount of mercury in their feathers. Western palm warblers are up there as well. So we are continuing to work with that. We've sent the sampling company a couple of years worth of passerine bird samples, and we're waiting eagerly for them to get time to run the rest of those samples to see what we can find out about how that mercury is accumulating through the course of the lives of these birds.
Of the 287 cloacal swabs I analyzed,
Oops.
18.46% had DNA from at least one prey species. The majority of the swabs with prey DNA detected one prey OTU, 8 swabs detected 2 prey OTUs, and 2 cloacal swabs had 3 or more prey OTUs. Of the 11 species of raptors I swabbed, 5 species had samples with prey detections. I think the main reason I did not see any prey detections for the other 6 raptor species is simply because of a small sample size for those species. The graph here is showing the total number of swabs per species with a prey OTU detected. The colors of the bars show whether the prey on the swab were birds or mammals. The purple means that the swab had 2 or more OTUs that included both bird and mammal DNA. Based on what we know about the diet of these raptor species, the types of prey that I found matched up nicely with each species' expected diet. Sharp-shinned hawks prey primarily on birds. Cooper's hawks and northern goshawks hunt a mixture of birds and mammals, and red-tailed hawks and northern saw-whet owls eat mostly mammals.
I hope that you heard the narration there. Let me know if you didn't. I apologize. I keep meaning to get that out of there and I keep forgetting to do that. Sorry, but this is a study of looking at what are these birds eating as they migrate, and taking cloacal swabs of the outspout for the birds gives us an idea by consulting DNA databases what's happening. And you can see in here that sharp-shinned hawks are eating primarily birds. But one of the things that we found out was that our bird DNA database was not as extensive as it needed to be. So we're working on filling in some of those things. As you can see, Cooper's hawks are about half and half. So are northern goshawks. Others tend to be more towards the mammal side of the spectrum. Interesting stuff. And as they sampled these birds, some interesting things popped
The
up.
next interesting case was of
Oops.
several sharp-shinned hawk
Okay.
swabs and turkey DNA. These 3 samples were all collected in the spring. Now, if you aren't familiar with sharp-shinned hawks and you're wondering if one could kill an adult turkey, the answer is no. So what's the deal here? I thought of a few possible explanations. First, that they had simply eaten a turkey chick. But wild turkey chicks in Minnesota and Wisconsin don't hatch until early June, and these samples were collected in late April and early May. And free-range turkey farms in our area would not be letting young chicks out of the barn at that time of year because of the cold. Wild turkey chicks do start to hatch in late April in southern Texas and Florida, but it would take several days for a sharp-shinned hawk to fly from the southern US to Duluth. And while we don't know how long prey DNA can hang out in the cloaca for, the average gut retention time for raptors is about 6 to 8 hours. So it doesn't seem likely that a swab would detect prey eaten more than 24 hours before the sample was collected. The most logical explanation I could come up with was that these sharp-shinned hawks had been scavenging turkey remains. Now, turkey hunting season in Minnesota and Wisconsin runs from mid-April to the end of May, and I thought this provided a nice explanation for a source of turkey remains for sharp-shinned hawks to be scavenging. I should note, though, that I could not find any records of sharp-shinned hawk scavenging in the literature, which is really what makes this such an interesting finding. Outside of the migration season, sharp-shinned hawks are secretive low raptors, so I see this as pretty compelling evidence that there needs to be more research done on the feeding habits of sharp-shinned hawks, especially during migration.
So Katie, can you tell me, are you hearing that dialogue with the slide?
So when the narration started initially, the volume was very, very low. So the first portion of it, we kind of missed. So you may want to summarize.
Yeah, my apologies, folks. It's an imperfect science here. I thought I was getting just images and I got all this other stuff too. So yeah, Sharpshin hawk, you can see from the tiny size, why in the world would you find wild turkey DNA in a cloacal swab of a Sharpshin hawk? So there were some hypotheses. These were birds that were caught in the spring. And so the thought was maybe they were catching turkey babies. Well, it turns out that these birds were caught in late April or early May, and babies in the wild turkeys in Minnesota don't turn up until late May, beginning of June. Problem. Can't call that one a good solution. But it was also observed that turkey hunting season is from mid-April to the end of May. So perhaps some of these birds are feasting on carcasses, the injured birds that were found later, or gut piles and things like that. But there are no records in the literature of Sharpshin hawks scavenging. So this may be a new thing. Seems kind of rationally possible to me. I mean, hey, you're in unfamiliar territory when you're migrating, you take advantage of what you can find. And perhaps they are doing that with wild turkeys, taking advantage of birds that they're finding as a result of the turkey hunt. Here's another fun one for you. I'm going to just whip through it quickly and hope that that gets done talking quickly. I'm going to skip ahead to the next slide.
In fact, possums are not
There. Summarizing that one for you. Yeah, northern goshawks, their range is not overlapping with the range of possums, and that particular bird was banded in the spring and found to have possum DNA in its system. So that's an interesting story. Where is it coming from? And I don't know that there's a very good hypothesis to that one. So there's a lot more going on in that whole world of what are you eating as a migrant than we know about. So there's certainly more work that needs to be done with that. And so we're hoping that some further studies are identified to continue with that. We have another grad student from UMD who is working on isotope sampling and trying to connect migratory birds to where they're actually coming from as far as their breeding territories and where they're raising young. So stable isotopes and migration. You are what you eat and drink, as the saying goes. There's stable hydrogen isotopes, a lighter weight one, protium, and then deuterium, which has a neutron that the other one doesn't. And these will turn up in the water samples and the environment in areas, and they vary worldwide. And we know that we have different levels of these two isotopes. And so it makes it possible for us to figure out where these birds are breeding. And this whole project is creating it's called a feather isoscape. So taking feather samples and trying to figure out from the feather samples, which presumably will reflect where the bird was born, particularly in juvenile birds, that'll give us an idea where these birds that are migrating, how far they're actually coming from. So that's pretty cool. Looking at what the isotopes are going to tell us. So blood samples that were taken and feather samples were taken from 438 Sharpshin hawks, a number 423 saw-whet owls, and a number of red-tailed hawks. So the grad student that's working on this is just getting into analysis part of this. So it's going to be really interesting to see what comes out as it begins to get some results. So what do we want to find the answers to? our early season migrants traveling from places further south. We know that our bald eagles do that. The early bald eagles that are leaving right now are, I call them tourist birds. They're birds that have bred further south and completed their breeding cycle in April, May, and often come north to for 10,000 lakes and better fishing and better weather too. Do males and females do the same things, or do they do different things? Are individuals from further north actually larger? We have that hypothesis in a lot of things. We can do that from measurements and figure out from our samples if that's really true. So lots and lots and lots of questions to come from that study. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens. Here's another one for you, red-tailed hawks. If you look at a range map of red-tailed hawks, they are perhaps one of the most widely dispersed birds in the Northern Hemisphere. And we know that there are a whole bunch of subspecies in red-tailed hawks. And you can see from this map, we have birds from the west that are in the Calurus subspecies, and birds from the east, the Borealis subspecies. But here's the interesting thing. Light morph birds are known to occur in both the western and the eastern one, but according to the officials, there's no such thing as a dark morph of the eastern subspecies of Borealis, only in the western species, subspecies Calurus. But the truth of the matter is, at Hawk Ridge, we see a lot of dark morph birds. As much as 13% of the red-tailed hawks that come through Hawk Ridge are dark morph birds. So where are these birds coming from? Are they wandering western birds? Is there a dark morph Borealis that nobody has documented? Are Calurus and Borealis integrating or hybridizing? Or is there something else altogether, another subspecies called a beta cola? And let me introduce you to a beta cola subspecies of, this is the northern red-tailed hawk. And you can see from the range map down here on the left side of the screen, there is a whole population of red-tailed hawks that breed in the boreal forest. And these birds actually migrate to the south, whereas these other birds are likely to stay year-round. A beta cola are identifiable by this really nice buffy body color, and the Borealis is much lighter. So you can tell the difference between a beta cola and Borealis, but a beta cola has been kind of spoofed and not really given a whole lot of credibility as a subspecies as of yet, but this study may change that. We have a grad student that is studying measurements, taking blood samples, tracking DNA, and being able to consult with the DNA databases for Borealis and Calurus and see what happens. And she has also got some satellite transmitters on to see where these birds are going. Last fall, she was able to successfully put a satellite transmitter on a bird in the fall that was an beta cola but light morph. And then she was able to capture a dark morph, a beta cola, in the winter in February. And so she's been tracking these birds. I just got an update from her, and of the two birds, she's pretty sure that either the transmitter's not working or something's happened to the bird on one of them, but the other one is still going. This one is the one that she caught in February down in the Twin Cities and was able to put the transmitter on. Now you can see on the left side where this bird has gone, and it's gone all the way to northern Manitoba, but the location has not been updated for 95 days. That means it probably bred even further north than that, and it's likely out of cell phone range. But the hope is that when fall migration comes into play here for these red-tailed hawks, and they're going to be later, so we're going to have to hold on to our anticipation here, but we are hoping that we will get an update from this bird once it gets back into cell phone range in this fall migration season, and be able to pick up where this bird has been and complete this map series of where this bird is actually breeding, and being able to find out, okay, where's the connection here on these dark morph birds? Where are they coming from? So that's fascinating. We've got another study getting started this winter with northern hawk owls. They're one of the least studied North American owls. We see them fairly frequently in northern Minnesota. And so this study wants to look at wintering grounds. How much do they eat? What are their foraging habits? What's their baseline metabolism? There's some fancy technology involved there, being able to remotely measure metabolism, and also, again, some more satellite tracker tracing stuff going. Unfortunately, last year was the beginning of that study, and it was not a great winter for northern hawk owls. There was only one in the Sax-Zim Bog region, and we went all over the state looking for them and just really didn't find them. So we're hoping that we'll have better luck this winter. And just in case you're interested, the grad student has a little fundraising thing if you want to contribute to help with the northern hawk owl study. There's an opportunity here to get a t-shirt with northern hawk owls or coffee mugs or whatever to help support that research. So the link is on there. You can screenshot that if you're interested in contributing to that research project. So some really cool stuff going on. We also have a grant from the LCCMR and to study PFAS, and PFAS is called the forever chemical. You folks in the Twin Cities probably remember 3M and communities in the Twin Cities having a massive settlement because they found that PFAS, even though they thought it was non-reactive and not involved with things, it's been found to be a persistent chemical. It stays forever. And there's also thought to be connections between mercury and PFAS. And so we're involved with a study now to look at that. It was thought to be entirely harmless to the environment, but it does climb up the food chain like so many other things, as you can see from this graphic. It goes from the smallest things all the way up to the bald eagles and through the fish. We know that it's found in the water systems wherever it's been used. It causes neurological effects on both humans and birds. Blood work has been done and some initial stuff has been found out. Interestingly enough, northern goshawk females have less PFAS than the males, and juveniles have more than the adults. On the sharpshin side, females have more than the males, but age doesn't seem to impact how that happens. So there's a lot of stuff interesting going on with this, and definitely something that'll be interesting to watch as we continue to get some more answers to what's going on with this. We've been taking blood samples. We did a lot last fall, and we'll finish up with a few more this fall and get a really good cross-section with these birds. So much to know and so much more to learn about these birds. We hope that you can get yourself up to Hawk Ridge, fall or spring. It doesn't matter. It's amazing, and we would love to have you. If you're interested in volunteering, we definitely have a bunch of projects at Hawk Ridge that we would love volunteer help with. Yep, we're in our 50th year of counting and banding, and the big 50th year celebration will be next fall at the completion of that year. 3 million birds counted and still counting. And I thought I would leave you one more parting shot, literally. Here's a bird from last fall. This is one of the enormous number of rough-legged hawks being released last fall. COVID has stopped us from having the general public release these birds, but I didn't mind getting the opportunity to release this one. If you don't think that's amazing, well, okay, there's still hope for you. Thanks for coming, everybody. I'm sure there are some questions out there. I really, really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you, and feel free to chime in with Q&A and other questions here. Katie, back to you.
Great, thank you. So one of our guests, Alicia, has asked, can you explain how the birds are captured?
Sure. Back at the banding station, when we're, well, you know, any of the birds, there's different strategies for owls than there is for passerines and for raptors. But to summarize for raptors, raptors need a little encouragement to come in. So back at the banding station, there are lures that look like injured birds. It looks like free lunch is sitting there just waiting, but there's a net between the raptor and free lunch. So that's how we catch them. And the banders are watching constantly from a little blind. As soon as that bird is caught, they run out there and get them out and then bring them back to the blind for processing. Passerines are a little easier. The songbirds, basically you set the nets where you think the birds fly, they can't see them and they get caught. So that's how we capture those. Owls, that's a different scenario. That's at night. And what they do for owls is play. Believe it or not, it's fall, it's non-breeding season, but play the male territorial call and it'll bring in the birds. So yeah, you will hear the at the banding station all night long, the saw-whet owl call, which always sounds like a dump truck backing up. Beep, beep, beep. All night long. And it does do a nice job of getting those birds to come in.
Jan says, do you know where the mercury comes from that was seen in tissue samples? More mercury in bird eaters than other raptors?
Yeah, there's a couple of hypotheses with mercury, but that's part of what the study is all about, is trying to isolate. Mercury is in the atmosphere and it can be distributed atmospherically. But it also can get into the water system, and that's methylmercury is another way that it can transmit. So that's part of the whole idea of the study, is to look, okay, are these birds getting more from the methylmercury source? Or are they getting more from the atmospheric deposition? So yeah, more stuff to be learned as we go along.
Great, thank you, Margie. I don't think that we have any other questions. Lots of thanks and praise for the program tonight. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. I think fall migration is something that certainly in this area, in this region, we get really excited about, and not everybody has been able to make it up to Hawk Ridge, and maybe we have some new people that have moved to the area. I've been meeting a few here and there at outdoor events that are brand new to Minnesota. So this is a wonderful opportunity to let them know just how cool the area is, how unique it is specifically for birds during periods of migration, and hopefully connecting them to a wonderful new resource.
Yeah, there's a bunch of the season yet to go. We're just getting started on the fall season. So yeah, there'll be counting going on through the end of November, but the public tends to cool off literally by the end of October, the public interaction, but we do keep things happening with education and things actively going on at the Ridge through the end of October. So you got a good number, got a good 8 or 9 weeks yet to get up there and be part of the migration this year. So hope we'll see some of you, and thanks so much for the opportunity to talk to you tonight.
Of course. And for anyone on here who is interested in getting in on some planning for some birding outings, birding can be done hiking. We have birdability birding excursions too. For anyone who might have a mobility challenge, we've got some really great work going on to evaluate and need your help into evaluating areas that are good for birding, that are wheelchair friendly. Just because something, a site says that it's ADA accessible doesn't actually mean that it's accessible all the time. And so we need our help of our fellow birders to go out there and check out some of our favorite birding spots. And we're helping to rate those, and we're participating in the birdability program. So you can actually submit your comments and your evaluations of your birding sites to an interactive map online, and that helps a lot of other birders out to get a sense for what they can expect during different times of the year and during different conditions. We are also still here in the Metro organizing some paddle birding adventures, and so there's an opportunity, whether you have your own canoe or kayak, or you want to rent a kayak through the paddle share program. We still have some dates left before the end of the season here this month to get out and do some kayaking on the Mississippi River right through the greater metro area here. It is such a cool birding experience, and definitely a unique opportunity to see the downtown Minneapolis in a way that perhaps you haven't before. So in the chat box, I put in a note with my email address, so you can email me directly and then I can set up times for small groups to be able to look at what dates work for them and what type of birding activity you're interested in. Otherwise, you can leave your email address in the chat box as well, and I can pick it up there, whatever you are most comfortable with. Again, thank you, Margie, for a wonderful program tonight, and thank you to everyone who joined us. We look forward to seeing you all at a future program. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Margie. Good night.